Welcome to the Photography Opinion Podcast. We discuss all things photo, video, and camera related. I'm Ben Lucas.
And I'm Stuart Marlantis.
And this is Photo Op.
Welcome to the show. As we teased last episode in Should You Work for Free, in which the answer was no.
Nope, never. Absolutely
never.
not. Nope, don't do it.
This episode, we're going to talk about why photography is expensive, because if you're not working for free, if you're charging for your services, invariably people are going to ask you why it's expensive. So we're going to answer that question today.
Yes. So this episode is going to come to you in two parts. So the first part is going to be literally breaking down why photography is expensive. Mm-hmm. So if you're trying to figure out your cost of doing business and what this is costing you and what all goes into it, that is going to be part one. And then part two is we are going to be talking about why no one cares and what you should tell people instead. But we'll get to that. We'll get there. All right. So why is photography expensive?
A whole bunch of reasons. I mean, it's like running any business. I mean, you've got cost of materials, you've got your salary, you've got taxes, you've got gas if you're going somewhere, you've got a whole bunch of stuff, rent. So long story short, it's like running any business, and businesses cost money to run. So
I do want to kind of throw in here that photography does not have to be expensive. So if you're just getting started or this is a fun hobby for you, all you need is your phone. The best camera is the one that's with you. Like, this doesn't have to get crazy. You don't have to go into debt like we talked about on that other episode about gas. We'll link to that below in the show notes. But you don't have to spend a ton of money. However, if this is your sole source of income, if this is the thing that you are doing to earn your living, and you are running it like a true business, there are going to be a lot of expenses associated with that. So that's kind of what we're talking about here.
For sure. Yeah, this is specifically talking about photography as a business and not as a hobby.
So I think the easiest way to do this is a bunch of years back, I was writing tutorials for this company called Tuts Plus, and I wrote an article for them called "Is Your Photo Business Ready to Grow? Cost of Doing Business?" So I'm actually going to link that down in the show notes, and we're going to run through that article really quickly here. One thing that I did in that article is I linked to the cost of doing business calculator by the American Society of Media Photographers, ASMP. The problem with that link, people keep telling me it's broken, and every couple of months I get emails saying, hey, the link's broken, because they changed their website or the URL or something. So just Google cost of doing business calculator, ASMP. It will take you to whatever the current version of that calculator is. If not, just open an Excel spreadsheet, figure it out, follow along. But we're going to kind of run through that here really quick and talk about some of our true costs. So for ease of use, I'll just use the numbers that I used back then, even though they're, close-ish, not accurate, but close enough for hypothetical discussion purposes. So when you're kind of running through this calculator, you have your target salary. That is, how much money do you have to take home to pay your own bills? So I put in there $3,000 a month. And in that old article, I actually said, like, hey, here are all the things that I personally have to pay for. And so this is how I came up with that number. Obviously, it gets much harder if you're like, oh, I need to bring home $100,000. I mean, I'd love to bring home $100,000. But so then they have slots in there. You have to pay an accountant. This stuff's going to get complicated. I certainly can't do it myself. You're going to have to pay for advertising. And in fact, I put very low ball advertising on this. I said $750. What's that? Oh, that's a month. All right, that's not that low ball. So that's $9,000 a year for advertising, which, Yeah, if that's roughly like 10% of your gross income, that's about right. Obviously, if you're smarter and more creative and have some ingenuity, then you can figure it out for cheaper. But
Yeah, a lot of people I think neglect any consideration of advertising, like paying for advertising. This is hugely industry dependent, of course, and if you've got like some super slam dunk social media following that actually converts into clients, then maybe you don't need this as much. But depending on where you are, I mean, even stuff as archaic sounding as print advertising can be well worth the investment. So don't just blow past advertising and assume that you don't need to spend any money there, because you might just find that it really pays off.
yeah, I actually pay for print advertising. I get and here's something else that I will say about print advertising is if you pay for like I want to be in a national headline, it's going to be super expensive and it's going to have a really bad ROI. But if you pay for advertising of like I want to be the front page of my local like golf courses like pamphlet that their members get, that is going to cost far less than the big ad campaign, and it's going to be much more targeted to the specific demographic of people who are doing their weddings at that golf course.
Yep. Yeah, definitely in advertising, you need to very specifically target your audience, and that is going to be much more worth your money. Don't just blow it on the biggest, flashiest thing you can, because that will likely not work out for you.
Absolutely. So like if you're doing Google ads, don't just say wedding photographer.
Yeah.
Say, rustic wedding photographer, Seattle. Like that keyword is going to get you much more targeted result. And especially putting the type of photographer that you are means that the clients who actually message you are more likely to hire you because they will match your style.
Definitely.
So some of the other things in this list, bank charges, you can get around that by getting a free checking account, but just every little thing adds up. Business taxes. So I know that taxes are generally some percent of your income that varies on, state, country, etc. But there are things that are unavoidable even if you make $0. And by which I mean your business license, your city license if you need that. There are going to be fees, and maybe it's $30 here, $50 here, $100 there, but that will add up and you need to account for that.
Definitely.
And then there's going to be things like getting your domain and your web hosting. So throw some money in there. Education, continuing education is super important. If whether it is online classes or doing in-person workshops or tutorials for new software or lighting or stuff like that. And I will be doing some courses of my own coming up in the near future. So if there's anything that you do want to learn, please let us know, and we may just make a course for it.
Same here. Yeah. Education, photography to some degree used to be an industry that was gated more by an initial education and then equipment than anything ongoing. You used to be able to have that education, have those strobes, and you were good to go for a long time, decades potentially. That's not the case anymore. Like almost any other industry in the digital age, you have to stay abreast of what is going on. You have to keep learning. You have to keep building your skills to stay relevant and to stay competitive in the market. So again, education like advertising, you can fall into a trap of, well, I know everything I need to know for my particular industry. I can
You can
almost
always
certainly
get
guarantee
better.
that
You can always grow.
Yeah, you can always grow. You can always get better. Don't rest on your laurels, because you will fall behind very quickly.
Whether it is actually refining your craft or learning new techniques or just, business classes.
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
There's always something that you can do. So investing in yourself and growing that business is critical. And then there is equipment.
Ooh, that's a fun one.
Yeah. So for my calculator, I put $3,500 in the annual fund for equipment, and that sounds astronomically high, except it's not.
Nope.
One set of strobes gone, one camera gone. There are so many things that you buy that thing gone.
Mhm.
You want to buy a new desk, it might be half gone. Like,
Yep. Yep. I mean, plus this one, now that it's at a business expense, you can justify spending money on gear, which is super fun, as we've discussed before. So,
or go back to our gear acquisition syndrome episode
yeah.
and learn how to not spend on gear. Uh,
Yeah, this certainly is a little bit more flexible. It's certainly you need to set aside money for it. It really depends on where you are. I feel like what your annual spend should be, but there should be some amount of annual spend set aside. Because let's say you don't use it, right? Let's say you don't.
it rolls over to next year.
Yeah, it turns out you don't
You
need those
will
strobes
use
or
it.
whatever. You'll use it eventually, so it'll pay back hugely later down the road if you don't use it this year to next year have maybe an extra expense and say, oh wow, I'm so glad I set that money aside. Now I can cover that expense.
Let's say bare minimum you want to replace your camera because eventually your camera will break and stop working. Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And the new camera you have your eyes set on is $2,000.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's say that you have 4 years expected life of your current camera before you have to spend that $2,000. That means you need to put at least $500 a year into that fund so that you can have that $2,000 when your camera dies.
Yep.
So you will use it eventually.
You will.
But then you have insurance. Oh, don't cancel your insurance. I'll be doing a non-podcast episode about that on my YouTube channel. Just please don't cancel your insurance. Make sure you're covered in case stuff happens.
That's the other way you can replace your camera. If your camera gets destroyed somehow and you have insurance that covers it, then you're good to go and you don't have to use that equipment budget in place of insurance. So keep your insurance. It's not really that expensive, all things considered, when you think about how it can pay back.
Then there is internet. So if you're paying, $80 to $100 a month for internet, there's legal fees. And you might think, I don't need legal fees, but very simple things such as updating your contract.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have a model release. If you do weddings, you need to have a wedding contract. If you do boudoir, it is pivotally important that you have privacy clauses in that contract. And just having a lawyer that can look at your current contracts and be able to update it as new laws and new things come out, to be able to make sure that contract never gets outdated. There is another thing about contracts where if a part of the contract cannot be, if it's like illegal or cannot be enforced somehow, like having a clause in there that also says, yes, but these other things can still be enforced to the most of their extent. Well, then if you learn that one of these things can no longer be enforced, having someone that can actually change that for you and update that for you is super important so that you don't get stuck in a position where you're working with a bad contract, then something happens and you have to fall back on that contract.
Mm-hmm.
I know that was a mouthful, but did you follow along with all that?
For sure. Long story short, cover legal.
Yeah,
You'll need it.
yeah. You will need it eventually.
Yep.
So even if it's just a little bit right now and you don't think anything's going to happen, like, it's gonna happen. Mm-hmm. Even just like negotiating a lease for a new studio, like there's gonna be stuff. Furniture, getting desk, getting tables, getting an office chair. Your phone, if you're having clients calling you, that's a business expense. Mm-hmm. I put personal or promotional products in there, so that is your own investment, your own advertising. Whether you want to do pens, I absolutely love my brother's pen here that he did for his business. It is the best writing pen, and I see Linwood Kids Dentist every time I write with it. So if you want to do something like that, that's cool. But otherwise, if just investing in yourself to do a cool project, like I did my pinup calendar. Mm-hmm. So anything you can do, that you need to be able to pay for that somehow. If you own your own studio or space, there's going to be property taxes on that. If you don't own that, there is going to be rent that you have to pay. There's always going to be repairs, whether it's just getting your lenses calibrated or a button stops working and you need to have those gears, or your strobes stop firing for whatever reason. Always repaired. Every year I use my repair budget and then some. Mm-hmm. And then there are going to be subscriptions. One of those that almost all of us have is Adobe subscription.
Yep.
Which I think we'll be covering some alternatives here in the near future as well.
Yeah, we'll definitely be talking about software at some point, but you'll definitely want to pay for some kind of software each year, whether that's paying Adobe like so many of us do, or whether that's one-time purchases. If there's an option that works for you in that space, you will have software that you need to buy. And I mean, even stuff that's not directly related to editing. Like I have since I shoot a lot of video, I actually have a piece of software that makes all of my separate hard drives in my tower kind of mesh together as one and appear as one master hard drive. That costs money, and that's something that you wouldn't necessarily know you needed until you got to that point. So think about software potentially more than just specifically for editing, because there's lots of stuff out there.
I pay all kinds of subscriptions. If you have Amazon Prime, by the way, Amazon Prime, not just good for shipping boxes, you get unlimited JPEG storage. That's a subscription. I use another one for all of my client galleries. They do have a free tier that has very limited space, and they take a cut anytime a client buys a thing from the website. Or if you pay them, you get unlimited space, and they don't take a cut. You get to keep anything that a client buys. So I pay a subscription for that service. I use a slideshow service, Animoto, for client sales. That's another subscription. There are so many subscriptions outside of just Photoshop. And then there's going to be travel expenses, and we don't just mean jetting off to New York or LA, especially not right now.
Not so much.
But just gas to get to and from your client shoots. Going to Glazers to pick up that rental. You know, there are things that you need to go do. And then I think we already covered website and hosting, but making sure that you can, pay for all of that. So
as we always say, have your own website.
Yes,
you must
absolutely
have your own
website. For sure. So there are all of these things that you have to... Oh, I just realized why it's in there twice. One is domain, one is website. It broke it up into two, and it's alphabetical.
Yeah,
so,
they can sometimes be in the same package depending on who you're hosting through, but... regardless, set aside money for your domain and for your hosting fees each month.
So I did a very conservative low. Let's just assume that you can get by with rent on $900 a month, which is laughable because that's half my rent.
At least in the Seattle area,
yeah. But you add all of that together, and you came out with over $74,000 a year in operating expenses.
Oh boy, that's a big number.
So granted, that $74,000 does include your salary, but that salary I think was paying rent and food and car insurance. I don't even think it covered health insurance or vacation.
Yeah, that was bare minimum.
So bare minimum, that means if you want to make minimum wage and take a vacation every once in a while, you're looking at $100,000 that you need to bring in to your studio after you've paid all your overhead, and now you're finally getting a salary.
Kind of scary.
Yeah, it is. So when we say, why is this expensive? Because it is. Running a business is expensive, and especially a photography business. Because I know people who run a business and they teach yoga, or running a business and they're consultants. Their overhead is so incredibly low. They don't have $40,000 worth of equipment sitting in their garage.
It is quite the real killer with photography. All this ongoing stuff, all this equipment. There are many businesses that you can get away with a lot less than this. But yeah, photography is expensive just because it is. There is so much involved in it. And all of this, as we were just talking about, these are all ongoing expenses. So
yeah, this is per year.
Per year, exactly.
Annual.
So this is not this is not one shot where you pay this off and then you're done. This is all annual expenses. So this doesn't go down. If anything, it continues to go up as rent goes up and cost of living goes up and equipment gets more expensive. This is the bare minimum, and it's still a pretty big number for a lot of people.
Yeah, years ago, I bought my 5D Mark III for, what was it, 3,400, 3,600, something like that. Well, the new Canon 8K just got announced, that I'm like, oh, I need that. And that's like 3,800. So even though technology is getting better and cheaper, like, costs are still going up because the level of thing that is coming out is not getting less expensive. It's getting more expensive. You're getting something better for that money, but it's not less money.
Yeah, definitely not. It's a rare company whose product comes out and is cheaper than the previous one. I don't think I've ever heard of that being the case.
That doesn't happen. So that is all the expensive part. Kind of how all of this. Why is this expensive? It's because we have needs. I need to eat food. You need to pay me to be able to eat that food. Anyway, if you go look at the tutorial that I wrote way back when, the next part of that is I talk about billable units, where it's how much should you actually charge per hour based on all of these things. So what you need to do, listener at home, go home, Google cost of doing business calculator, and just find that, fill it out for yourself with your true expenses. Figure out what is your cost, what do you need to charge. That's kind of your base level.
Yes, we are asking you to do a little bit of addition and multiplication, but it is well worth doing.
It does it all for you.
Yeah.
It does all the math for you.
Well, yeah, the
you
calculator
just need to
does
know
all the
your
math
expenses.
for you.
But yeah, so go in there, figure out. Yeah, it gets a little mathy, but figure out your actual cost of doing business. Figure out your billable units, and I will explain. It explains everything in the article. I'll give you a short explanation right now. Billable unit can be anything you decide it is. You can decide that it is an hour. You can decide that it is a day. You can decide that a billable unit is a week. Like, whatever a billable unit means to you. You can decide that a month is a billable unit. But when you figure out what that billable unit is, I believe I did it days. So it's how many days per month can you actually work? Can you actually do this? And you start with what you think are a lot of billable units, but then you take out getting sick every once in a while. You take out taking a vacation. Maybe you want a day off once a week. That'd be crazy, wouldn't it? Right?
Whoa, days off?
Days off. And you start ending up with less billable units. And the fact is, when you get less billable units, however you define that unit, you have to charge more for that unit to be able to get the same amount of income.
Yep.
So once you've run through the calculator, figured all of that out for you, you realize this is quite expensive and you do need to charge a lot.
Yeah, because you're not doing photography as a business, an independent business. You don't have those guaranteed 40 hours a week like you do in standard 9 to 5 if you're working for somebody else. That is, it is lovely to have that guarantee, but you don't have that guarantee here, just plain and simple. So you often have to kind of construct these billable units out of having often dramatically less than 40 billable hours a week. So that's something you really have to take into account. And that makes those 40 hours a lot more expensive as an hourly rate, so to speak, than a normal job would have.
Yeah, so I think in the example that I did in the article, my billable unit was a day. Just like, if I shoot something that day, the whole day's gone. And I ended up with about 8.5 billable days per month. So it very much, it sizes down quickly, especially because you can't be shooting. You'll burn out. And then there's more math there on if you shoot this genre of thing, how do you make this much money for a billable unit? Yeah. So you can go look at the calculator. We don't need to get into all that in the podcast. The whole point of this is, why is it expensive? This stuff is expensive. There's a lot to pay for. If we've listed something that you haven't thought of, leave a comment and let us know what it is that you didn't think of, because we would love to know that we're being helpful.
Definitely. And guess what? with all of this, nobody cares.
No one cares. Okay, so this brings us to part 2. Why does no one care? The client only cares about what you can do for them. I've seen so many photographers, whether it's doing a blog post or sharing on their social media, like a graphic of like, hey, this is all the stuff. I have kids and have to pay for their school and rent and food. No one cares. It makes you sound whiny and entitled of like, why should I have to pay for your lifestyle?
Yep.
That's how that comes off.
Don't start listing this stuff to a client that asks. If a client asks you why it's expensive, don't start listing, well, my legal expenses are XYZ. That nobody cares.
No one cares. Absolutely. That is just going to force you out, and they're gonna go to the guy who does a wedding for $100 because they're like, he doesn't have these expenses. The reality is he does have these expenses. They just don't know.
Yeah, he's just eating the cost either intentionally or unintentionally.
So all of this is expensive, but now we have taught you it is expensive, but now you have to teach your clients that it is expensive. So how do you teach someone who comes to you for a wedding and they're like, cool, what's your wedding budget? I need 2 photographers for 14 hours and my budget is $1,000. Well, instead of laughing at them, which is rude, don't do that. You need to educate them and make them feel and understand all of this without just throwing a bunch of numbers at them. So how do you do that?
Well, I mean, I think you need to kind of reorient how you describe photography to people. I mean, this is really an investment that they're making. For their kind of future memories. It's not just a disposable product like so many other things are. I mean, photos are irreplaceable. I mean, you have, especially in a wedding, you have that one shot at those photos, and that's it. So don't you want to make sure that they're really, really good photos that you're going to treasure for the rest of your life?
Absolutely. And so just the fact that I mostly shoot weddings and portraits, there's a flip side to this of if you're doing something for a commercial client, I make widget X. I sell that widget and I don't care. Like, this guy can give me photos for $10. Why are your photos $100? It really comes down to good photos, like you said, are an investment. So even when you're not talking about investment in like memories, truly, if you can only get $5 for that widget with a garbage photo, but maybe you can get $10 for that with a great photo.
Or you just get more sales. If you've got more janky, terrible looking photos of your product and people are like, "Ooh, this seems really amateurish," then they're less likely to buy it. Yeah.
You're going to lose the conversions.
But if you look super professional, if your photos are perfect of your product, then that's going to visually inspire more confidence in your product, and people are going to be, even if it's not consciously, people are going to be more likely to buy it because they're going to take the product more seriously due to its superior presentation.
Absolutely. I actually, I was talking with someone who runs a company that sells vaping products. And I know that there are a couple of big brand names. They are not one of those, okay? They're like a small independent something, and this market, as far as I'm aware, is not a huge market. So they're competing with these really huge brand names, and they've got this small little thing, and I said, well, I'd be happy to, they said, we need photos. And I said, I'd be happy to do photos for you. Looking at how many products you have in your catalog and the different details you would need, let's just say it was $1,000 for all these photos. And they're like, nah, that's too expensive. I could pay you like $100. Well, obviously it was no deal. And so what they ended up doing is they took photos on their cell phone, but they didn't know lighting, they didn't know angles, they didn't actually show off the best parts of the product. The photos were tinted a little bit wrong because they didn't understand white balance. There were just so many things that were bad and wrong with these photos. And I ran into them later and I just casually said, hey, how's everything going? They're like, yeah, not great. We don't really have any sales right now. Well, how much money are you losing that $1,000 investment would have gotten you in inventory you don't have to pay for storing, in lost sales, in advertising that's getting no ROI? So, I mean, it is an investment. So if you have a wedding client, then you can sell them on the memories, and you can sell them on this is a thing that is irreplaceable. But if you have a commercial client, you can just lay it out for them. How much are you losing by not having good photos?
Yeah, these photos are a representation of your company, a representation of your product. Don't you want them to compete at the same level or better than everybody else? I mean, that is your first impression often with people. They click on the product and they want to see the product before they buy it. And if it looks bad, then they're probably not going to buy it.
Imagine a dating app where there's no photo of the person. Like, the whole point of Tinder is you look at the photo first, bio second. Like the photos are critically important.
Yep. Probably the most important.
So that's just the first thing. And if they don't understand that, is you are paying for knowledge and education and experience. That guy, he took photos. He was his own photographer, but what's the difference between his and mine? Maybe he went to Costco and bought a camera and he owns the same stuff I do. It doesn't mean that he can use it in the same way. So you have the actual cost, whether it is the investment in memories or the investment in your company. You have, you are paying for knowledge and experience and education. There are hidden hours. I don't just click a button, walk home and eat Burger King.
Well, and not only they're hidden hours, but there also are non-hidden hours, I should say. I mean, oftentimes when you're paying for something, when you're paying for photography, you're paying for faster photography than you could get otherwise. Like, you could maybe, like, let's say, you could maybe get similar photos to ones that you're paying for, but you don't have the experience. Let's say you have the gear, but it's going to take you 10, 20, 30 times as long to figure out how to make that same look as you would just paying a photographer to do it right the first time. That's the other thing, is you're paying for it to be done right the first time, and that kind of guarantee of a good photo. If you're doing it yourself, or you're paying somebody who is a lot less experienced, who's a lot cheaper as a result, they're not necessarily going to do it right the first time. There's going to be a lot of wasted time. You're paying for that efficiency that comes from that knowledge and education and experience, and that is well worth the investment.
I have a perfect example, actually. My wife is a seamstress, and so she has a lot of people that give her like a jacket or a bag and patches, and she'll sew on the patches. So these people, most of them, they know how to sew. They can put on their own patches, but the reason why they hire her is because her lines look cleaner, and it would take them 10 times as long as it would take her. I don't want to spend my entire 40 hours at home sewing on patches and stabbing myself over and over when I could pay you a few dollars to do it for me. Like, it at that point, it is a absolute no-brainer. Which also brings us to the next one of, like, superior products. Of if you pay someone else instead of trying to do it yourself, like, you're getting something better. Or if you're paying a better photographer versus someone who only charges $100 for a wedding, you're getting something better. It's the you get what you pay for situation.
Definitely.
I think the last little thing here is we've talked about kind of the necessity and the investment and all of the things, but I think sometimes, like, photography is a luxury. As a photographer, it's not a thing we like to think about ourselves. We like to think we're needed, right? But this pandemic has shown us we're not an essential business. We don't need photos. So the thing is, you need rice and bread and milk and eggs. Those are commodities. You need those things. And buying a 1 pound bag from Costco or a 1 pound bag from Safeway, it doesn't matter that this bag is, it's been double rinsed, organic, whatever. You're gonna go with whatever the cheapest one is because it is a commodity. So commodities are all the same. As a photographer, you are not the same as any other photographer.
Definitely to go Kirkland Signature, though.
Obviously, I've got my 40-pound bag of Kirkland Signature rice. Let's just throw that out there, okay?
But yeah, but yes, you're right. It is photography. Sadly, is not a necessary business. It is a luxury, but it's a luxury worth paying for all those reasons that we just talked
Yeah,
about.
but I think the other thing with that is as a luxury of like, hey, you're gonna get what you pay for. Of, do you want someone who is going to take 6 months to get back to you and it will look half-assed and the communication is like, hey, I shoot him an email and it takes him a week to get back to me? Or do you want someone who is responsive? On top of it, you give them photos and 72 hours later you have them in your inbox? Yes, you could go with the other guy, but if you give them all the different levels of service besides just the photos, but then also have superior photography on top of it, that the type of client who is willing to pay for all of that says, yeah, it's a luxury, but I'm willing to spend on this luxury because I don't want to sew 40 patches. I don't want to stab myself. I'm done with that. I want the luxury of paying you to do it.
Yeah, you're educating the client here. The client doesn't want to know about all of your individual specific expenses. They want to know. They want to get results. Why are they? What results are they paying for? And all of these things apply. You know, they're getting either irreplaceable memories, or they're putting their best foot forward to their clients or for their business. Certainly it is a luxury, but it is a luxury worth paying for. And this is how you tell the client, is you're educating them on what exactly they're buying. And that is for all of these kind of less defined but still very important reasons, although except with businesses it's pretty well defined, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, they have an ROI. It's
exactly
pretty well defined.
They have an ROI for them, but they don't want to hear about your studio costs. They don't want to hear about what gas costs. They want to hear about what's in it for them, and these are all the reasons
They want
why.
to know that you're gonna get the job done and you're not gonna be a pain. Like,
Exactly.
what are the benefits? If you can give them that value, then the cost doesn't matter. If something is only expensive if you're not getting the proper benefit from it.
Yeah, they should be educating the client in this way. They should be happy to spend this money, ideally, at the end of this process, especially when they've gotten the results. They should come away thinking, wow, this was so worth the investment that we made.
Absolutely. So I think that's kind of a good wrap up here. So why is photography expensive? Because it is. There's a lot of stuff to pay for, but if you actually get into that with someone who wants to pay you, you're going to come off whiny. So don't do it.
So why is photography expensive? Because your photos are irreplaceable. You can't afford as a business to not put money into photography because of all of those excellent reasons. Because you're paying for knowledge,
because you are getting
education,
a
experience.
service that you can't get anywhere else.
Exactly.
I'm going to take care of you. And then they just go, oh, thank you.
Exactly. You're getting a superior service. That is why photography is expensive.
So this has been a great discussion. I hope you guys have found it useful. I love that we've just been rolling on this kind of money train here. And so the next one that we have coming up was a great question that came in. When can you charge money?
Yeah, when can you charge for your photography services? This is a big question, especially as we've talked about with hobbyists or people who started as hobbyists and want to go pro. When can you charge money? We're going to help you with that.
If you have questions or ideas for future episodes, you can email us at hello@photo-op.show.
Watch us on Ben's YouTube channel at Nom Creative.
As in Om Nom Nom.
Share this with a friend, and you can listen to Photo Op anywhere podcasts are sold.
Or download it. 'Cause it's free.